There are leaders in democracies that don't want to hear from the mainstream press. They don't want to be questioned. Now, another example of that right now, I'm just talking about the United States, is the Pentagon, the Ministry of Defense in the United States, which our current Secretary of Defense, which has changed, he is Pete Hegseth, and he's changed the title to the Ministry of War. That word choice is important when you're a journalist. Ministry of Defense, Secretary of Defense has now become Secretary of War, Department of War. Now, just it was last week, they insisted that the journalists who cover the Pentagon, which is our Ministry of Defense, have to sign a 25-page document saying they commit to all sorts of stuff, including if the Pentagon, if the minister decides they don't like that article or what that TV report or whatever, that journalist can be declared a security risk. Nearly all, so hundreds of journalists refused to sign this document and then had to leave their offices inside the Defense Department, and I think only 15 signed, a couple freelancers from Turkey, a couple Russian, I can't remember who, and a few very sort of pro-Trump, extreme right things, but everybody else, all the mainstream media backed up. So we're for the United States, and AP is American, it's a really delicate moment for us in the press. But I'm in Italy, so I cover Italy and the Vatican. And it's interesting here, we have a Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, that she went to the White House after Trump met with Putin in Alaska. She went to the White House with Zelensky and a bunch of European leaders. And afterwards, Trump invited the press into the room and he said, should we take a question from these guys? And she was caught on what we call a hot mic saying to him, you know, I don't like to talk to my press. And this is true. Giorgia Meloni doesn't like to talk to the press in Italy. She doesn't speak to us. She hardly speaks to us at all. She has one press conference. It's called the end of the year press conference. Last year, she did it at the beginning of January. And that's the only official time that she has a press conference all year long, which is not a good situation for journalists. In fact, the way the system works, she'll take all the questions. She'll take like 130 questions at that press conference. Last year, it lasted so long that she had to get up and pee because it was just going on and on and on. Poor thing. If she would just speak to us regularly, it wouldn't be like that. And the weird thing about this is Giorgia Meloni is a very smart and capable woman, and she can handle those questions. She is no fool. Whether you like what she says or you don't like what she says, she is smart and can handle the questions. So I'm not sure why she feels so hostile to the press, but it's a problem. So how does she get around this? She has her personal cameraman who goes with her everywhere and films her conferences, films everything she does, her speeches, and then she sends it to us journalists, and we get also a written copy. I work in the TV side of AP, so I need the video. I need to get the sound bites out of it. So I can get all the stuff I need from what Giorgia Meloni's saying and use it in my reports, but I can't ask her a question. So it's defeating, in a way, our purpose as the media. We are supposed to question authority. We are supposed to hold them responsible. But if we can't even say, you know, why are you doing this, or what's going on with the migrants, or whatever question we want to ask, it's a bit difficult. So anyway, let's go down my notes. So another, let's see, where was it? Oh, and then the other big issue is, I've talked about the US, and I'll talk more about Italy, but just around the world, it's very hard for journalists to go into war zones. Freelancers have a lot of difficulty, and then some countries make it even more difficult. We've seen now what's happened in Gaza. The foreign press wasn't allowed in. They were kept out. At the beginning, they let a few crews, TV crews, people go in with the Israeli military. Otherwise, no one was let in. So news organizations like the Associated Press were relying entirely on local people who were putting their lives at risk every day and ended up getting killed. Nearly 200 people have been killed. One of them was Miriam Daga, a woman who was working as a photographer for Associated Press, and she was killed while covering a hospital. So it's a very difficult time for journalists. We're dealing with that. Then there's another thing that's happening. Is that in media is changing so much. When I grew up, there was the newspapers and television broadcasts, news broadcasts. And now everybody gets their news from social media. I imagine all of you, where do you get your news from? Do any of you read newspapers or watch TV programs, or do you go through social media like Instagram and TikTok? And show of hands, how many people get it through social media? How many people don't get their news through social media? Oh, fair number. Okay. Well, you guys are pretty sophisticated. Anyway, so what's happening is everybody's getting their news from social media. And so we, as news organizations, have to change completely the way we do things if we want to have an audience. So, long news reports, long investigative journalism sometimes goes out the window so we can get stuff on internet. So to give you an example, this spring, I was covering the long hospitalization of Pope Francis, and then the election, the conclave and the election of Pope Leo the 14th. And AP asked me, like, okay, you have to do a little vertical thing every day and talk for a minute and do it. Like, I'm 61. Come on, don't make me do these things. Like, you guys know how to do that kind of thing. But I had to start doing that because that's what gets attention. That's what gets yours attention. That's what gets the younger generation's attention. And then maybe you'll click on longer stories that we've done. But we have to adapt and change to meet this new world. The other problem with the social media is that people can really get into echo chambers, and the mainstream media, which AP is a part of, continues to get pushed aside as more people just go to what they want to hear, the podcasts they want to hear, and the Instagram, the algorithms start giving them what they want to hear. And so pretty soon some are listening to things where they're getting a lot of fake news or a lot of inaccurate news because they're not going to news sources that really are, AP always brags, we're fact-based journalism. We try and stick to the facts. So that's kind of the bad part of it. The good part of it is that being a journalist is great. It's fun. It's storytelling. I work here in Rome, and as I said, I cover politics. I cover the Vatican. Over the years, I've traveled with popes, starting with John Paul II, Benedict XVI, Francis, to all over the world, to Africa, to South America, to the United States. It's really exciting. The best thing about being a journalist is being there, seeing it happen. I was in the Oval Office with Obama and Pope Francis. It was so cool. I really loved it. So there are a lot of exciting, interesting moments when you're a journalist. But there's also, in Italy, we cover lots of other things like culture and food and history. There's so many things. If you wanted to become a journalist, you just find anything right around where you are. For example, we're here at the Center of American Studies, and a huge political story once happened right outside the door here. This Aldo Moro, former Italian prime minister, after being held in captivity for 55 days, after he was kidnapped by the Red Brigades, they left his body in the trunk of a car right out here on Via Caetani, because it was near the Bottega Escure, which were the communist headquarters. So that was a huge news story for us. Another interesting story, we're here while we're talking about this location, stories all around us everywhere to do and cover. We're in the Jewish ghetto. The Jewish ghetto is a fascinating part of Rome, and I would be interested, actually I should propose a story. I would be interested to know right now, what is it like having a store in the Jewish ghetto in Rome right now? There's rising, because of what's happening in Gaza, there's a lot of rising anti-Semitism. What is it like having a store? What is it like being there? And the history of the ghetto, it's in the middle of I don't know how much time you've had to walk around, but it's beautiful. It's the middle of the Roman ruins. How much has the ghetto diminished? What's the actual Jewish population living there right now after what happened in World War II? In Italy, history and politics is around you everywhere. Right over here at Largo Argentina, Julius Caesar was killed right over there. So there's always news happening around in Italy, things to cover, things to report on. That place is a cat sanctuary. We've done stories on how where Julius Caesar killed is now a cat sanctuary. So with the AP, you can do all sorts of stories. There's also a huge interest. Probably the best area to go into if you want to be a journalist right now is food. Food reporting is exploding. I'm not very, like, I'm not into that because I like to eat food, but I'm not an expert in food. But I know a lot of my colleagues who've gone into food journalism. They're getting sent all over the world. Like, go to Madagascar and do something on vanilla beans and how that becomes the vanilla ice cream that we eat wherever. I don't know, do a story on pizza in Naples, do a story on mozzarella and how the mozzarella di bufala is made and how, how the buffaloes are treated. Anyway, so there's endless amounts of interesting stories that can be done. And besides the negative part that I started out with, there's a lot of room because now any of you can be journalists because you can just take your phone and do those vertical videos for TikTok or Instagram. You can do stuff on YouTube and you can get it out there and do it yourself. Hang on, let me just see what else. Just to tell you a little bit more about the AP and my experience. I started out back in the day. I'm a bit of a dinosaur. Back in the day when there were no cell phones and no internet, no AI, no chat GPT. And that was really fun to be a journalist back then because you could go out and do stories and interview people and think about things and contemplate them and do things really thoroughly. Now it's all boom, boom, boom. Someone else is posting it. Someone else. So we have to be sure to get the facts right, but get it out really fast. I love to tell the story about when I went to work as a freelancer in the Philippines, and I went on this island, Negros, where there were communist rebels. And I went up into the mountains to stay with the communist rebels. And I'd been staying at a hotel waiting for the person to come to take me up in the mountains, all secret and cool. And then I was working for CBS Radio at the time. And I got back after, I don't know, a week with the rebels. And at the hotel, there was a little piece of paper in my little key box at the hotel. That was when hotels still had a little box with a key in it. And it just said, call your editor in New York. And that's how it worked back then. You just had more time. You could do really interesting and cool things. But now with Associated Press, we always are under pressure to do things live immediately. We bring these backpacks around with us, live view backpacks. So we go out with a camera and everything has to be live. Pope dies, or Pope goes into the hospital. Last February 14th on Valentine's last year, Pope Francis goes to the hospital. As soon as we hear the news, one cameraman and I ran to the hospital. First thing we do, set up on the hillside, across from the Pope's window. Popes always stay in the same part of Gemelli Hospital. Camera on the window. Then I'm doing my little 1 minute TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, stand-up things. And that's how it starts now. It's just constant. Then, of course, months and months of interviewing nuns, praying outside the hospital and stuff like that. Before I go on, does anyone have any questions? No questions. Okay. I'll just give you a little bit more on the history of AP. I've told you about my history in the Philippines. And AP started in 1846 when a group of newspapers in the United States got together and said, we cannot afford to keep a journalist down to cover the US-Mexican War down on the border, because all the newspapers were in New York. So they put a journalist down there who they made an association, the Associated Press, and they put one guy working for the Associated Press down there that would send back a copy by Pony Express. I don't know if you guys know what Pony Express, now you know what the modern Pony Express is, but back then in the United States, the Pony Express was like a guy riding on a pony to hand off to another guy riding on a pony, all the way from the border with Texas, the border with Mexico, back to New York to hand over the copy. And then all the newspapers got the same story. So that's how Associated Press started, as a group of newspapers. Now, and so it's based on subscribers. So subscribers get our reports. They pay us a fee annually. They get our reports and they go out to to whatever our reports go out to all our subscribers, and they can use them as they wish. Then in the 1990s, after that, they started radio. Then in the 1990s, AP started doing television. And but it's kind of a weird thing. We go out, we cover things, we film it, we interview people, then we put together like a 3-minute edit, and then and a story written separately, and we send it out to 800 broadcasting subscribers around the globe. So I don't know, NHK in Japan, BBC in the UK, CBS in the United States. Our broadcaster clients take our reports and can do what they want with them. They can put their own people talking over it, but they've got our written report, our video, our interviews. We give them a shot list of what everything is. So it's kind of frustrating sometimes for us who work in the TV part, because you don't see me. You don't see me unless I do those little Instagram or thingamajigs or TikTok thingamajigs. But all the work I do just goes out there for other broadcasters to use. But again, AP's trying to reinvent itself now because it has to, because our majority of our income comes from our subscribers right now, but we're going to have to find a new way to get income through other sources now. Anyway, so just going back to the Vatican is a huge topic for us here in Rome. There are a lot of Catholics out there. You'd think we would cover more, it might cover equally politics in Italy and the Vatican. No, there are so many countries, right? I guess you probably know that I had to take a day off work today because otherwise I'd be covering King Charles and Queen Camilla that are at the Vatican. It's a really big deal. There's so many Catholics in the world and countries that are always interested in everything that the Pope does, that the Pope says. There's also a huge fascination with the rituals and the things at the Vatican. I don't know how much all of you followed the conclave this spring, but a bunch of old men locking themselves up in the Sistine Chapel and going through these rituals and choosing their leader is really unusual in 2025 and really fascinating. And so we covered a lot of that, and we were doing sort of 24/7 coverage on that. And then, as I was saying earlier, we travel. We go everywhere in the world where the Pope goes, photographers, TV people, print reporters. We travel. Actually, at the end of this month, this Pope is taking his first trip. He's going to Turkey and Lebanon, so I'll be on that trip. And that's kind of cool. They put the journalists in the back of the plane. When the Pope goes somewhere, he flies on ITA Airways on the way, and then the country that's hosting him provides the plane for the way back to Italy. So I guess it'll be ITA Airways to Turkey. From Turkey, we'll go to Lebanon, and then from Lebanon, I don't know the Lebanese national airline, but a plane of theirs back to Rome. The press sits all in the back. We don't have any access to the Pope from the back of the plane until on the way back, he comes back and speaks to us and has a little press conference. So it's very important to be on the papal plane because that's the one chance we get access to the Pope. And Pope Francis really made that more important because right from the beginning of his papacy, he started saying things. On his first trip, I wasn't on that trip. He was flying back from Brazil, and someone asked him about homosexuals in the Vatican, Catholic homosexuals, and the Pope Francis said, "Who am I to judge?" And that made huge news. When did a Pope say, "Who am I to judge?" Homosexuals were always pushed away from the Vatican. So that was the first big breaking news that Pope Francis made while on the papal plane and during his press conference. I was there with Pope Francis when he went to Mexico, when Trump was running for president the first time. And the huge thing in a pillar practically of the papacy of Pope Francis was helping migrants and recognizing the needs of migrants. And he went to Juarez on the north on the border between El Paso, Texas and Mexico, and he prayed before a cross and on the border, and people in El Paso were looking through the fence. And that was when Donald Trump was campaigning for president and saying, "I'm going to build a wall." And then on the way back on the plane, someone asked him, well, what do you think of candidate Donald Trump building a wall? And the Pope said, a person who does that is not a Christian. So he was basically saying a candidate for president of the United States is not a Christian or cannot consider himself a Christian. And that made huge, huge waves at the time. They got over it because then Trump came and met with the Pope and several times. And yeah, it was, yeah. So, but just to say, that's been a good opportunity for us journalists to question authority, speak truth to power, to get access. It's actually been better right now covering the Vatican than covering politics. Other stories that are, I said, speak truth to power. That's one aspect of it. The other is giving voice to the voiceless. A huge part of my job over the years in Italy, starting in like 2015, has been covering migration. The huge flow of migrants across the central Mediterranean to Italy, going to Lampedusa. I went to Lampedusa and Sicily a lot, watching people come in on boats with nothing, just bare feet, and talking to them and trying to figure out why they came, why they risked their lives, how they got their money to pay, you know, 1,000 euros or whatever for the crossing, their experience in Libyan prisons. I did a big story once on Nigerian women. For a period, there were a lot of sex trafficking of Nigerian women, forcing them into prostitution in Italy, and their whole, it was just so eye-opening for me, so frightening and interesting, but important to be out telling their stories. And that was very, as sad and tragic as some of those stories are, it was very satisfying for me to do that. All right, again, any questions? Okay, one here and then one there. Yep.
Hi, my name is Monica. You mentioned before Giorgia Meloni and everything, and just yesterday, I think, al Senato, she was talking about how the freedom of press is really important in democracy, and how Italy got better, according to her, according to the ONG reported Reporters Senza Frontiere, which is not completely true. And I think this is a very important topic because, I don't know, even on the national news on RAI, there's been speeches censored, for example, on the 25th of April, or I don't know, I remember watching it after the day of protest, and they would spend 2 minutes talking about them, talking about them, like no one participated to the strike, or people were just annoyed. And then like they would spend 10 minutes talking about some TikTok trends or something less relevant just to fill up some space. And I'm thinking, if we cannot even rely on the national news, what can we trust? I mean, like, I know we should read more than one newspaper and get our information from more than one source. But what about the part of population that only watch that, and then maybe they're the ones that go voting, and in Italy there are not so many, so like even the few that goes, they only relied on that. And if we cannot even rely on that, like I feel like it's not discussed enough how actually freedom of press is not really a thing anymore, unfortunately. And I don't know, like I feel like it's really bad. We've studied this before and no one is really doing much about it. So how can we change this, or how the press or journalism is affected by this? Thank you.
Well, I can do self-promotion and say, read AP, look at AP. We really covered all the pro-Palestinian protests. We were live, we had several crews on them. We covered it, we sent it out around the world. And it got a lot, I mean, even my mother in Boston was saying, wow, it's incredible. So on that front, I think, yes, I think you're correct about RAI. I think RAI has always been that way. It's a government controlled channel. I often watch Rai Uno because I'm just curious to see what the government is saying about things. But you do need to, at least now we do have the internet and you have all your social media. You have to go, cast your net widely to get other sources of news. I also think that you're correct that the people watching Rai Uno or Rai Due at night are often elderly. And then they're watching some of those god awful shows afterwards that I don't even know how, like Carlo Conti. Oh my God, they're like so chauvinist and it's even gotten better since Berlusconi times. But yes, there is a problem and an issue, and I don't know when Italy will ever change on that. It's this weird thing about Rai Uno, Rai Due, Rai Tre, and dividing it between the parties. And I don't know if you know about the panino. The panino, for those of you who don't know, is this thing on Rai that they have to. On political reports, they have to have the leader of every major party talk. So they launch into this political report, and then you see Conti walking up and saying his thing, and then someone from Fratelli d'Italia walking up and saying, like one and then Schlein saying her thing, and then they just have one boring politician saying their thing until they've gotten through all, and then Renzi saying his, and then they have to get through all the parties, and then you've wasted like 3 minutes of a 25-minute newscast with these each just pumping their party line, which we don't want to hear anyway. So I'd say that Rai is a big problem, but I think that there are plenty of other sources, and I think it's important also. My mother's been visiting Rome, so I was with her, and I took time off work. I did not hear Meloni's speech to the Senate. I think that's interesting that she said that if she was defending freedom of the press in Italy, because I just find it very unusual that she's so hesitant to speak to the press, especially because she's so smart and capable. And then if you look at Trump, who's always criticizing the press and calling us fake media and insulting us, but yet he loves the press. He loves being on TV, and he'll say whatever he wants, but if he sees a TV camera, so he wants to be heard. Unlike Meloni, I think she really truly doesn't want to talk to us. She just wants to get on with her job. So if that's what she said, I disagree with her. I do think that it is good in Italy that there could be protests that were so huge without that much violence. I know on Rai Uno, Rai Due, they said, it was so violent and this happened and that happened. I don't think that for all the millions of people there, it wasn't that violent. Anyway, okay, next.
Hello, I'm Aurora, I'm Italian. I wanted to ask you, since you spoke about how today, news spread very, very quickly and in many different ways, especially considering the impact of social media. So, what's in your opinion, the best way to get the attention of people when they read newspapers and articles and news?
Wait, to get the attention, or where
Yeah.
should you dedicate your attention?
No, to get the attention of people, in the articles when they read.
All right. Well, this is also a huge problem that I haven't talked about, which is clickbait. And Associated Press, as I said, is trying to transform itself into more social media friendly. And so we're trying out new stuff with us having to appear in these vertical videos and do social media things. And we have a new boss in Rome. He's younger than I, he's 42. And he's trying to push us to do this. And I'm going to make fun of him because I don't think he minds. But the airport in Rome announced that they're opening this new luxury hotel for dogs, and it's the dog relay, and people can have Zoom calls with their dogs, and then you press a button or something during the Zoom call, and a dog biscuit will pop out. And anyway, so he went to do that. He was all excited about this story, and he went to do this story, and the camera person went with him, and a photographer, and he did his little social media thing in front of the dog thing, and he came back, and I'm like, it looks like dog Guantanamo. It doesn't look like a luxury dog hotel. I would never put my dog there. Like, why are we doing this stupid story? He went ahead with it, and it got tons of clicks, and he was so proud. And he's like, look, everybody loved this story. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm just getting too old. This isn't real life. So I think we're doing a lot of experimenting, and like animal stories always work, but do we really need to be doing sweet cat stories, or at least do the one on the cat sanctuary where Julius Caesar was killed? And I don't know why Romans love cats, like put a little more depth into it. But it's a very tricky moment. There was another silly story that I thought we shouldn't have done. was they did a Ferrari trying to make a world record on the deck of an aircraft carrier, and they invited all the press. And this new boss of mine went, and again, he did his social media thing, and they had this Ferrari. It lasted like, it did break the record, but it was like 60 seconds, because otherwise he would have been off the end of the aircraft carrier. And he did a story, and it got tons of clicks, and everybody at AP was really happy. For me, that wasn't news. Another example, which I did myself, like one of the first social media things, it was on over tourism. And I went to the Trevi Fountain one summer, like August, when gazillions of people were there. And I just talked about, for 1 minute, about over tourism. And everybody saw this thing. Everybody. I mean, it was like not even real journalism. It's like this, this many people come, and Rome's trying to figure out what to do, and people throw their coins, but they're too many. And everybody loved it. And my bosses were like, great job. We got so many views. I'm like, oh God, I'm being reduced to just doing like silly nothingness. But so it's a problem. We got to figure it out. Anyone else back there?
I'm Francesca. Thank you for your speech. And so during this diplomacy festival, we met a lot of journalists, and all of them talked about the fact that there's the need of being objective and detached from the story that you tell while being a journalist. But I wanted to ask, do you think like the same? Like, do you agree with them? Because I think that if you don't like fully live the story, like if you don't make it yours, can you actually tell it in its complete and real truth? That's my question. Thank you.
That's a good question. None of us can ever be completely objective. We all come from our own background. We have our own views. We have to control ourselves. We have to think hard about trying to be objective. Even within news organizations, there's often frustration and debate. We've had a huge problem with the war in Gaza and the vocabulary that we use and how we describe things. And different staffers have come down very different positions on the issue. And so I would say we have to always strive to be objective, strive to do our best to show all sides of a story. But we can't escape from our own personal viewpoints. It's interesting also, just going back to like what news organizations let you do. AP is very rigid with all of us. We're not supposed to be using X to give any opinions, even if it's like, oh, go Roma, or they don't want us to support teams. They don't want us to support politicians. They don't want us to criticize politicians. They don't want us to wave a Palestinian flag or wave an Israeli flag. I mean, we have to be really careful about what we can do. So we could cover that Palestinian demonstration, but we couldn't go to it. We wouldn't be, AP wouldn't accept that because then we'd be accused of bias. So it's very difficult when you feel strongly about things. Also, it's a difficult time right now in the United States because I don't know if you've all heard, but there's this ICE, which is this migration police basically that's going around trying to round up to 3,000 migrants a day and put them in detention centers. And so journalists have been out covering that and covering demonstrations, and they've been tear gassed by the police. So it's hard for a journalist when you're getting tear gassed by the police or something to maintain your objectivity on certain issues. So strive for it, do your best to tell the truth, stick to the facts. I say nobody's perfect. Okay, who's next? Help. Here, I think there was next.
Hi, I'm Francesca. Thank you for your speech. I wanted to ask, since you mentioned the journalists in the war zones, I'm thinking about Gaza, but also the other conflicts that are around us every day. How are the journalists protected? Like they are under bombs? Where is they like? If you know something about what they have to do, if they are protected enough, I don't think so. I don't think that they are protected by the government. And what are the consequences of the governments that after a journalist, for example, has been killed, what is happening and what should the government implement in that field? Thank you.
Okay, I am not a war correspondent, never have been. I know for Associated Press, for example, anyone who wants to go and cover a war zone, Ukraine or wherever, they have to take a special training course where they learn how to walk through a minefield, what to do if you're stopped by armed whatever. And then AP provides helmets, bulletproof vests. In certain areas, they provide armored cars. There's insurance. Over the years, AP has lost a lot of, I lost a colleague of mine in Gaza. Well, not Miriam Dago was one, but also an Italian, Simone, years ago. In Africa, we've lost a couple of correspondents, so it's very dangerous. AP tries to do what it can. Governments don't do much at all. You can embed, during a war, you can embed, like if the US is, I don't know, in Iraq, you could what we call embed with the US military, then you go with a US military unit. They provide you with the same thing they're giving the soldiers, and you just stay with them and follow them around, but you have to obey all those rules. That's what happened at the beginning of the war in Gaza. They said a few journalists once in a while could embed with the Israeli soldiers, and they go see exactly what the Israelis wanted them to see. So embedding can be good, but it can also be, you know, you're becoming propaganda for the government that you're going in with. A lot of people who wanted to be war correspondents have ended up freelancing, and that is a really, really impossible thing right now. It is really hard for freelancers to make any money. You know, they get paid, you know, $100 an article, and they have to go and risk their lives. There was a very famous one, James Foley, who had his head cut off in Syria and by ISIS, and it's not an easy life. So it's very hard, but it's better if you're with a major news organization that provides you with the equipment, provides you with the training, and there's insurance if anything happens. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Good morning. Thank you for your speech. My name is Emanuele. According to a 2025 Gallup poll, only 28% of Americans have a fair amount of confidence, that's the term they used, in mainstream media. While a study from the Pew Research Center found out that only 77% of Americans believe media organizations are biased. So why do you, my question is, why do you think is that? And whether is this crisis of mainstream media only the fault of AI and social media and artificial intelligence, or is there also some responsibility by the journalists or some mainstream media that might cover some news in a more biased way? Thank you.
I would say it's not the fault of AI that started before AI was around. I think there is a lot of mistrust in the mainstream media. I'm trying to think when exactly it started. I think it started really with social media and Twitter, and I guess in a way it was kind of like the rye thing. You know, when I was growing up, we read the New York Times, the Boston Globe, the Washington Post. We watched ABC, CBS, NBC at night in the United States. There wasn't anything else. So nobody was questioning the mainstream media because that's all you're getting. Their report on Vietnam was that you trusted, and journalists were sort of up on a pedestal. So it was good. It's a very good thing that internet exploded and people had access to information from wherever. And it's a very good thing that people can get information without the filter of journalists. It's a very special position to be that filter providing the information, but people don't need the filter. Anyone can just film what they see on the street and show what's happening. So I think that social media has caused this change, and that the mainstream media has to win back its support. But I also think what's happened, at least in the United States, is there's been this massive polarization. People have become very divided between the right and the left, and then people get in their own echo chambers, so they only listen to what they want to hear. So there are a lot of MAGA, Make American Great Again, podcasters. Then there's a lot of left podcasters. So people listen to only what they want to hear, and they think that everything else is fake news. So that's where the mainstream media has to show that they can provide the truth, despite our biases and our own subjectivities. We try to be objective. We try and provide the facts, but it's very difficult. And we are struggling as mainstream media. So those, I think those, I don't know those statistics, but they sound very accurate. And I think it's a struggle. But I think it's important that we continue to struggle because we can't let everybody get wound up in their own echo chambers. Who's next? Who's got the mic now?
Hello, I'm Elisa. I'm also Italian. I wanted to ask you, what do you think about the phenomenon that usually happens when somebody commits a crime, but there is still a lack of information about the killer? And so what usually happens is that there's a spread of misinformation about the identity of the killer or the person that committed a crime, like we saw, for example, in the US after the murder of Charlie Kirk. And do you think that it's a trend that is ongoing? And how do you think that us as news reader should be like, should do to avoid this kind of fake news that usually spread after the committing of a crime without the information needed to know it? Thank you.
I don't have any good solutions. I think it's a terrible thing. Just yesterday, a friend of mine who's a priest, an elderly priest, got accused of some sexual molestation. I was shocked that his name was just thrown out all over the place without any proof. And I think the key thing is, if you think that someone is being unfairly accused or if their name is out there when it shouldn't be, don't retweet or reacts or don't share it around with everybody. The problem is the more titillating it is, the more awful, the more people tend to retweet and to, I don't know, what do you say? Retweet, reacts, what? Anyway, don't spread it. And journalists need to be responsible about not throwing the names out there. So I don't really have any good thoughts on that, but it's a problem as well. All right.
Hi, my name is Elena. I had a couple of follow-up questions. So the first one is about the fact that you said that, for example, as a journalist, of course, you can't participate to protests or have a clear opinion on an issue because you have to stay objective. But there is also concern your private life that, like, if you, when you aren't working, you want to participate to a protest, since you are kind of a public person, character, like, can you still participate to the protest, or is that still like taken aside and losing some of your professionalism?
We can absolutely not participate in our private life. No way. We cannot be seen. We cannot be photographed there. We can cover things. We cannot be involved. And even my own daughter, who's 25, she's like, come to this protest, come to do this, do that. Mom, you gotta get active. No, I cannot do it. I will lose my job with AP. AP has very strict rules about that. And I think it's good that they have strict rules. I mean, we do have to try and maintain some objectivity. We also can't give money to political causes, political candidates. We have to be very careful about that. Yeah, it's just the rules. And I think it's useful for us to have to follow them.
Okay, thank you. And also about the simplification of information that we were talking about earlier. Maybe it's not really that related, but just I wanted an opinion. Because I'm seeing that the left parties, especially in the US, are trying to simplify their language, their rhetoric. For example, on TikTok, you see the Democrats like posting memes like Trump is doing. So they're trying to use like a simpler message to get to as many people as possible. So do you think that's a good strategy, or this should stick to like professionalism, which is what the right isn't doing, but that is what works? So that's like.
Are you referring to someone particular on the left in the US?
No, I only see like the Democrats in general, like the official account of the Democrats posting
Ah,
this kind of
okay.
memes. So.
I'm not really aware. I do think that, again, same with politics. They have to be able to reach all of you, reach young people on social media. So I don't know if you guys know Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, but she's very active on social media, and she's considered the progressive wing at the party, and she is very, very effective. So I think a lot of people think, oh, and Mandani, are you guys following at all the election for mayor in New York? He's a star on social media, and it really works. So I think the Democrats need to wake up if they want to get the White House back. They need to wake up and become much more active and able on social media.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so my other question was about the role of Trump with social media and the whole journalist thing, because I think that one of his biggest way to be powerful and to be seen is the fact that a lot of medias, a lot of journalists, he's very famous, okay, worldwide. And what he does is kind of a show in front of the people so that people get to know him, also with bad or good actions. I'm not criticizing that. But do you think that the fact that the media is following him that much is what gives him the power itself? And don't you think that if the media continues doing that, it's what actually gives him the power to do what he does, not expressing, but yeah, so that's my question. Thank you.
Yes, I do. It's at one point when he was campaigning the first time for president, he was saying, absurd things and insulting people. And he doesn't have problem insulting people and saying fake things. And so at one point, some journalists proposed we should just stop covering him. He wasn't the leading Republican candidate. And they said, we should just stop covering him. We're giving too much media attention, and that's what he wants, and it's just making him more popular. But obviously you can't do that because he's a candidate for president of the United States, and you've got to keep track of what he's doing. Now that he is president, of course, we have to cover everything that he does. It's interesting. The woman who's head of news for all of AP now, her name's Julie Pace. She's an excellent journalist. But she was a White House correspondent during the first Trump administration. And she came here to Italy because there was a G7 summit in Taormina in Sicily. So we went out to dinner, a bunch of us, and there were a couple White House correspondents there. And back then Trump was using Twitter before he started Truth Social. And they said that they had all their phones, all the White House correspondents had their phones to do really loud beeps every time Trump did a tweet, because every tweet of his just set off the whole new news cycle, just made news. So all of these important journalists, you arrive at being a White House correspondent, you're a pretty important journalist, and they were all at the beck and call of Trump, who apparently would watch something on Fox News at midnight and then ooh, I think I'll do a tweet. And there was one they said that was really funny, that he did it at it wasn't funny, that he wrote something at 5 a.m. about coffee, and nobody knew what he was talking about, if he'd misspelled coffee and so all these journalists are trying to analyze and do reports on this guy who's kind of writing crazy stuff at all hours, and yet he's the president of the United States, so you have to cover it. But I agree in a certain sense. He's a showman. I don't know if any of you have ever just watched one of his press conferences or even watched him. Did any of you see his speech to the UN General Assembly? It's like, whoa, the teleprompter broke and he just started talking, and he's like, I wanted to build this building. It would have been much better if I built it. And the escalator broke when I was coming in. I don't know if they did it on purpose, but Melania's in good shape. So he was just going off and saying whatever he wanted. And yet the whole world was putting him, was putting out live, and everybody was watching it. Still, he's the president of the United States. He's the most powerful man in the world. We got to cover it. So.
Hello, I'm Cecilia. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to ask, why do you think people enjoy so much light-hearted news, like the ones about over tourism or the ones about the dogs hotel?
do you think it's because we're living in such hard times that people want to detach themselves from all this political turmoil that we're facing? Or maybe because they are just looking for something that is closer to them, that they can understand completely, respect to maybe the whole, again, political situation? Why do you feel they like this news so much? Thank you.
Both. I think you've answered your own question. Both. AP has started this thing, like they always come up with new things that we have to do. And in the last year, they said, we want joy and wonder stories. You have to come up with stories that are joy and wonder. It's like, well, what's that? And it's anything that will make you say, oh, wow. And I can't think of an example of a joy and wonder story. And then they came at us the other day and they said, we're starting this new thing called Be Well. We have to do reporting on Be Well. And I'm like, okay, I'll do a report on like yoga retreat in Tuscany. And it was a joke. And they're like, yeah, that sounds interesting. I still have to organize that story. But I think people really want to just get away from all the harsh news and the drones attacking Kiev and the horrors in Gaza and I don't know, Myanmar and the tariffs and all this stuff going on. And so they want something lighthearted. Not lighthearted, but something that's not going to bring them down. I think also that's why people just become obsessed with reading articles about food and how to cook food. So yeah, and then I think people, you're just scrolling and you see the cat stuff and you're like, ooh, cat. And so we have to be very careful in the news media, though, not to get stuck in that. We still have to remember that we're journalists and we have to provide something more newsworthy than a cute cat or the luxury dog hotel.
So if I can ask add to these questions, I wanted to ask, do you feel like today's readers have like a more paradoxal mind, in the sense that I have the example of my parents at home, and when they watch the news, they always comment like nothing ever good is reported regarding to the
Right, I understood. Nothing ever?
because, for example, in my house, when we watch the news, maybe we see the situation, I don't know, in Gaza, and my parents are like, nothing good is ever happening nowadays, so it's something terrible on the news. But at the same time, when we see like more light-hearted news, maybe new runway shows and such, they comment like, oh, now this is the important stuff that is being portrayed in the news. So my questions was, do you feel like today's reader are more like paradoxal, in the sense that they, I don't know, they have these mixed feelings about news?
Well, I hate to say it, but I think it's always been a bit that way. I mean, there have always been wars, maybe there's been less of the light news. But for example, we cover the Venice Film Festival, and that's something that's been going on for decades. And it's a positive news. It's a light news. But it's still it's sort of culture, films, etc. So I think it makes people happier, and it's okay to do that. It's the one that I think too much is just the silly cat stories. I like cats though. I like cats. I like dogs. I just don't think it's. Anyone else? Are we done? All right. Well, one more.
I think it was the same question. So about, I said again, that personally you can't expose yourself about what you think, and you can go to protests, etc. But how is it different from investigative journalism? Because that is still journalism. You still have to say professional, be objective when you say the facts. But at the same time, we see a lot of investigative journalists that are also activists. So how does that work? Like, is it different because they are mostly private, or they're like very even the like for example, Front Page is a journal, but it takes a side every time. So how does that work?
Yeah, I think you can say, as I said at the beginning, it's the journalist's job to give voice to the voiceless. So I think sometimes the journalist can be seen as maybe being activists for the voiceless. For example, AP got a Pulitzer Prize for a story they did on shrimp slaves. And I can't remember if it was off the coast of Thailand or Malaysia, but companies were taking these poor people and putting them on ships where they had to work processing shrimp or gathering shrimp or doing something with shrimp. for no pay. And they were kept on these boats for months at a time. So AP did this huge investigation. So you could say, okay, AP was biased in favor of these people, but how can, I mean, that isn't a bias. That's, or was activist in favor of, yes, that's okay, because that's something truly unjust and wrong. There shouldn't be slavery. Or as I said earlier, the women being, the Nigerian women being trafficked to Italy to be thrown on the streets to work as prostitutes, and how they were treated. I think when I was doing that reporting, I was very interested in sort of being activists. I wasn't feeling like an activist, but I felt like their story was the one that needed to be told. I didn't need to tell the story of the men going to pay them. But I did need to find out about like the legal action that was being taken against the traffickers. I mean, it was a more complicated story, but the focus of the story, and I felt my whole perspective needed to be those young women. So I think that's where this more sense of activism comes in. One last question, I guess.
It's just a follow-up. I can see why you were saying that people can't see you maybe a protest or being an active, because maybe, like, I don't know, they're gonna say, oh, she's one-sided, so I'm not gonna read her article because she had a different opinion, or she's definitely gonna make that opinion prevails. But don't you think it's kind of like a boundary to personal freedom? Like, I feel like ones can develop their own opinion and will develop their own opinion, even not participating actively in those kind of situations. So is it really necessary? Like, doesn't it go against to personal freedom, freedom of participating to strikes? And I don't know what you think about it, because I just see it as a restrictive thing. I don't know.
It is restrictive, but I feel safer for it. I have a very activist family. My mother, who's 88, has been walking around with signs outside the ICE detention centers in Massachusetts, just to give you an idea. My 25-year-old daughter has been protesting at all these protests here in Rome and is angry at me that I'm not there. I think it's more important for journalists and news organizations to cover those protests, to show and to interview the people. Why are you protesting? And get that out to the rest of the world. As I said, it was very important that AP covered the protests in Italy, because when they were showing it on Rai, they weren't talking about it, and Meloni was downplaying it all. But around the world, people were seeing the Italians are not happy with the position of the Meloni government on this issue. And Meloni is not, she's not stupid. She got it. So yeah, sometimes it feels a little tight. I used to actually, just to give you even a better idea, I used to be invited all the time during the first Trump administration to go on Italian TV, like Una Mattina, Italian shows, and talk about US politics and sort of as an analyst. And then AP said, no, don't even do that. It's too dangerous to talk for our journalists. The only people that can go on TV programs to talk about politics are the people who are covering the White House or who are covering it every day, so they can talk about what they're covering, what they're reporting. But if other people, they said, you can go talk about the Pope, you're covering the Pope, but I cannot talk about Trump, because for them that was too much of an opinion rather than analysis. So I felt a little bit like handcuffed or straitjacketed in this situation. But at the end of the day, it protects me from being accused of being pro-Trump or anti-Trump or anything. I think that's it. Thank you so much. You have all asked really good questions. Nice to see you all.